It hurts. But don't stop, cried the Luna. Endure it and you'll be mine forever, said the Alpha King, a werewolf romance audiobook written by Lyra Blake. Before we dive in, if this is your first time listening to one of our audiobooks, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. Stick around until the very end of the video and let me know where in the world you're listening from. Now let's begin. Chapter 1, The Storm's Promise. The day Catherine first heard the thunder call her name, she thought she was losing her mind. But when lightning struck twice in the same place, she realized destiny had found her. I pressed my palm against the cold metal of my weather station, watching the barometric readings spike in ways that made no scientific sense. 3 days into my solo research expedition in the Montana wilderness, and every instrument I'd brought was acting like it had lost its damn mind. Catherine. The wind carried my name again, low and rumbling like distant thunder. I spun around, scanning the pine trees that surrounded my campsite, but saw nothing except shadows dancing in the late afternoon light. My hand shook as I checked the Doppler radar for the 100th time. According to every weather service, clear skies stretched for 200 miles in every direction. But my equipment? It was screaming warnings about an incoming storm that shouldn't exist. Get it together, Cat, I muttered, pushing a strand of dark hair from my face. You're a meteorology graduate student, not some crazy person hearing voices in the wilderness. But even as I said it, the hair on my arm stood up. The air pressure was dropping fast, faster than it should during any natural weather event. My portable weather station's alarm started shrieking, and I watched in horrified fascination as the readings went completely insane. Temperature, dropping 20 degrees in 30 seconds. Wind speed, 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye. Lightning activity, imminent. That's impossible, I whispered, but the words were torn away by a sudden gust of wind that came from nowhere. The sky above me was still clear, blue as a summer day, but every instinct I had, every piece of training I'd received, screamed that I was about to be in the middle of a killer storm. And then I saw him. He stood at the edge of the tree line like he'd materialized from the shadows themselves, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like it had been tousled by wind that I couldn't feel. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. They were the color of storm clouds, gray-green, and electric, and they were fixed on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. You need to leave, he called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance between us despite the howling wind. Now, I should have been terrified. I should have grabbed my equipment and run. Instead, I found myself walking toward him, drawn by something I couldn't name and didn't understand. The weather stations aren't showing any storm activity, I called back, raising my voice over the wind that was getting stronger by the second. This shouldn't be happening. He laughed, and the sound sent shivers down my spine, not from fear, but from something else entirely. Something that made heat pool low in my belly despite the plummeting temperature. Your weather stations can't see what's really coming, he said, and as he spoke, the first drops of rain began to fall. Impossible rain from an impossible storm in an impossible situation that was making my scientific mind want to snap. Lightning flashed overhead, brilliant, violent, and so close I could taste the ozone in the air. In that split second of illumination, I saw him clearly for the first time, and my world tilted on its axis. He was beautiful in the way natural disasters were beautiful, dangerous, and mesmerizing, and completely beyond human control. His skin was tan despite the fact that we were in the middle of nowhere, and when he moved, it was with a fluid grace that reminded me of wind across water. But it was more than that. As the lightning continued to flash around us, I realized something that should have been impossible. The bolts weren't random. They were circling him, drawn to him like metal filings to a magnet. You're controlling this, I breathed, taking another step closer despite every rational thought screaming at me to run. You're controlling the storm. His eyes widened, and for a moment, Something that looked almost like pain flashed across his features. You can see it. It wasn't a question. It was a statement loaded with surprise and something else. Something that sounded almost like relief. I don't understand what I'm seeing, I admitted, my voice barely audible over the thunder that was now rolling constantly overhead. But I can feel it. The electricity, the pressure changes. The way the air itself is bending around you. It's impossible, but another lightning bolt crashed down, so close this time that it lit up everything around us in stark black and white. And in that moment of blinding clarity, I saw the truth written in his storm-colored eyes. He wasn't entirely human. My name is Alec, he said, and the thunder seemed to echo his words, rolling them around us like a physical presence. And you're right, I can control storms. But that's not the impossible part. I was close enough now to see the way electricity seemed to dance just beneath his skin, close enough to feel the static charge that surrounded him like an aura. What's the impossible part? He reached out then, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something deeper than attraction, deeper than curiosity, was pulling me toward him with a force I couldn't resist. The impossible part, he said, his fingertips hovering just inches from mine, is that you can sense what I am. No one else has ever been able to do that. Our fingers touched. The world exploded. Lightning struck us both at the exact same moment, but instead of the agony and death I expected, there was connection. Pure, electric, overwhelming connection that tore through every barrier I'd ever built and left me gasping and changed and somehow more myself than I'd ever been. I could feel him, not just his hand in mine, but his thoughts, his emotions, his power flowing through me like liquid fire. And he could feel me too, I realized. The wonder in his eyes told me he was experiencing the same impossible intimacy that was currently rewiring my entire nervous system. When the lightning faded, we were both still standing, still touching, still alive. But everything was different. What just happened to us? I whispered, my voice hoarse from screaming without realizing it. Alec's grip on my hand tightened, and when he looked at me, there was something fierce and possessive and almost desperate in his expression. You've been marked, he said, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't identify. We're bonded now, Catherine. Connected in ways you can't even begin to understand. Bonded? My scientific mind was reeling, trying to process what had just happened. That's not possible. You can't just. The bond between us will bring you pain before it brings you power, he interrupted, his thumb stroking across my knuckles in a gesture that was both comforting and claiming. Are you strong enough to endure what's coming? I should have pulled away. Should have demanded explanations, proof, logic. Instead, I found myself stepping closer, drawn by the electricity that still arced between us like visible proof of whatever impossible thing had just happened. I don't even know what that means, I admitted. But yes, I'm strong enough. The smile that crossed his face was beautiful and terrible and full of promises I didn't understand. We'll see. He started to pull away then, but I tightened my grip on his hand, panic flaring in my chest at the thought of losing this connection. Wait, I said. You can't just what happens now. How do I? Trust your instincts, he said, already backing away into the storm that was beginning to dissipate as quickly as it had arrived. They'll guide you better than any textbook ever could. But I need to understand. You will, he promised, and his voice was already fading as the wind died down. Sooner than you think. I blinked and he was gone. Vanished into the Montana wilderness like he'd never been there at all. But the evidence of his presence was everywhere. The ground around where we'd stood was scorched in perfect circle, the grass burned away by lightning that should have killed us both. My weather equipment was fried, every screen black and smoking. And my hands, I held them up in the dying light, staring at my palms in shock. There were marked there now, thin, branching lines that looked exactly like lightning scars. They didn't hurt, but they were warm to the touch. And when I concentrated, I could swear I felt electricity humming just beneath my skin. I stumbled back to my weather station on unsteady legs, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But as I reached for my backup equipment, something impossible happened. The readings that flickered to life on my portable devices showed weather patterns that shouldn't exist. Storm systems that were moving in mathematically impossible ways. Pressure systems that defied every law of physics I'd ever learned. And all of them, every single one, was centered on locations I'd never heard of, but somehow knew with absolute certainty were connected to others like Alec. Others who could control the weather. Others who weren't entirely human. I sank to my knees in the scorched grass, staring at the readings that proved everything I thought I knew about the world was wrong. The lightning scars on my palms pulsed with warmth, and somewhere in the distance, I could have sworn I heard thunder calling my name. What the hell had I just gotten myself into? Chapter 2, The Price of Power. 3 days had passed since the lightning changed everything, and I was beginning to understand what Alec meant about pain coming before power. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to block out the phantom agony that had been my constant companion since our hands touched in that impossible storm. Every few hours, waves of electricity would crash through my nervous system, leaving me gasping and shaking like I'd been struck by lightning all over again. But it wasn't just the physical pain. It was the knowledge that came with it. I could feel him, Alec, somewhere out there in the Montana wilderness. When he called storms, I experienced every bolt of lightning, as if it were tearing through my own body. When he fought to control the weather, I felt his struggle like it was my own personal war. And God, the visions. I'd abandoned my research campsite after the first night, when my dreams showed me tornadoes forming over Kansas 3 days before they were supposed to happen. Now I was holed up in a cheap motel room in Billings, surrounded by weather charts and satellite imagery that I'd printed from every meteorological database I could hack into. Because that was another new development. Somehow, I could access systems that should have been impossible to crack. The moment my fingers touched a keyboard, passwords seemed to whisper themselves to me. Security protocols melted away like they were made of ice. My phone buzzed with another weather alert, and I grabbed it with shaking hands. Hurricane forming off the coast of Florida, the message read. Category 5. Making landfall in 72 hours. I pulled up the official forecasts. According to the National Weather Service, there was nothing but clear skies in that region for the next week. They were wrong. I could feel the storm building, could sense its massive spiral of destruction like a weight pressing against my chest. In 48 hours, I'd be proven right again. Just like I had been about the tornadoes. Just like I'd been about the flash floods in Colorado. What's happening to me? I whispered to the empty room, but I already knew the answer. The bond. Whatever Alec had done to us, whatever we'd done to each other, was changing me in ways I couldn't control and didn't understand. A sudden spike of agony shot through my skull, so intense that I cried out and doubled over. But this wasn't the usual phantom pain from our connection. This was different, sharper, more focused, and it was accompanied by images that definitely weren't coming from my own mind. I saw Alex standing on a mountain peak, arms raised to a sky that was black with unnatural clouds. Lightning was striking him over and over, each bolt passing through his body and into the earth below. But he wasn't just being struck. He was conducting the energy, channeling it using his own body as a conduit to prevent something catastrophic. And it was killing him. I could see the toll it was taking, the way each lightning strike left him a little more drained, a little more hollow. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of exhaustion beyond anything human endurance should allow. The vision faded, leaving me gasping on the motel room floor. But the knowledge remained, burning in my mind with crystal clarity. He was sacrificing himself to protect others, and our bond meant I could feel every moment of his slow destruction. My laptop chimed with an incoming message, and I crawled over to check it. What I saw made my blood run cold. Catherine Chun. Montana State University graduate student. Meteorology department. The email had no sender, just a government domain I didn't recognize. But somehow I knew it was meant for me. You have abilities that interest us. We need to talk. Room 247. 1 hour. I was still staring at the screen when someone knocked on my door. 3 sharp, authoritative raps that made my skin crawl. Miss Chun. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. I'm Director Sarah Taylor. I believe you're expecting me. I hadn't been. But as I approached the door, that new instinct Alec had told me to trust was screaming warnings. These people, whoever they were, meant trouble. I opened the door to find a woman in her 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a black suit that screamed federal agent. Her smile was perfectly polite and completely predatory. May I come in? She asked, but she was already stepping past me into the room. We have a great deal to discuss. 2 men in similar suits followed her inside, and I noticed they positioned themselves between me and the door. Not exactly subtle. Who are you? I demanded, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. What do you want? Director Taylor's gaze swept over my weather charts and printed satellite imagery with obvious interest. We represent a division of the government that most people have never heard of. We monitor unusual weather phenomena. And lately, your name has been coming up quite frequently in our reports. She picked up one of my printouts, the one showing the hurricane that wasn't supposed to exist yet. Impressive accuracy. Our meteorologists are calling your predictions impossible. Care to explain how you're managing to forecast weather events that haven't formed yet? Lucky guesses? I tried, but the words sounded weak even to me. Taylor laughed, but there was no humor in it. Miss Chin, 3 days ago, you accurately predicted the formation of 5 tornadoes in Kansas. Yesterday, you sent warnings about flash floods in Colorado that saved dozens of lives. Today, you're telling us about a hurricane that our satellites can't detect. She leaned closer and I caught a whiff of ozone around her, the same scent that had surrounded Alec during our encounter. That's not luck. That's power. And power like yours is exactly what we've been looking for. My heart was racing now, and I could feel electricity building under my skin the way it did whenever I was stressed or afraid. I don't know what you're talking about. We call people like you storm-touched, she continued, ignoring my denial. Individuals who have been exposed to supernatural weather phenomena and developed enhanced abilities. You're not the first we've encountered, Miss Chun. But you might be the most powerful. The lightning scars on my palms were burning now, hot enough that I had to clench my fist to hide the glow I could feel emanating from them. Even if that were true, what makes you think I'd be interested in whatever you're selling? Taylor's smile widened and something cold settled in my chest. Because the alternative is watching your family pay the price for your abilities. She snapped her fingers and one of her agents handed her a tablet. The screen showed surveillance photos, my parents leaving their house in Seattle, my younger brother walking across his college campus, my grandmother tending her garden. Storm-touched individuals are classified as potential national security threats, Taylor said, her voice conversational as she flipped through images of everyone I loved. We can either work together to harness your abilities for the greater good, or we can treat you as the dangerous anomaly our protocol suggests you are. Rage flared through me, hot and electric. The lights in the motel room flickered, and I saw Taylor's eyes widen with satisfaction. There it is, she murmured. The power we've been tracking. It's magnificent, isn't it? The way you can feel the storms building, predict their paths, maybe even influence their formation. What do you want from me? I asked through gritted teeth. Simple. There's another storm-touched individual we've been trying to locate. Someone far more dangerous than you currently are. Someone who's been using his abilities to interfere with natural weather patterns in ways that could destabilize entire ecosystems. My blood turned to ice. Alec. Taylor's predatory smile returned full force. So you do know him? Perfect. Here's the deal, Miss Chun. Help us capture your lightning-wielding friend, and your family stays safe. Your abilities get properly trained and channeled for the protection of innocent civilians. She leaned forward, and I caught that ozone send again, stronger this time. Refuse, and well, accidents happen. Storms can be so unpredictable, especially around people who don't know how to control their gifts. The threat was crystal clear, but there was something else bothering me. Something about the way she moved, the way the air seemed to shift around her. You're like us, I realized suddenly. You're storm-touched too. For just a moment, her composed facade cracked, and I saw something that looked almost like pain flash across her features. I was, once. But I made the smart choice, Ms. Chun. I chose to work with the system rather than against it. And what happened to your abilities? Her laugh was bitter this time. Suppressed, controlled, channeled into more productive directions. The same thing we're offering you. You mean the same thing you want to do to Alec? Alec is dying, Ms. Chun. The words hit me like a physical blow, confirming what I'd seen in my vision. His bloodline carries a genetic marker that makes storm-touched abilities exponentially more powerful, but also exponentially more destructive. Every storm he controls, every weather pattern he influences, burns through his life force. She stood up, smoothing down her suit. He's the last of an ancient bloodline that believed they were sworn to protect the world from catastrophic weather events. Noble, perhaps, but ultimately futile. He's slowly killing himself to maintain a balance that technology could achieve far more efficiently. My hands were shaking now, the lightning scars practically glowing with heat. So you want to capture him and force him to work for you instead. We want to save his life, Taylor corrected, and use his abilities to prevent the kind of natural disasters that kill thousands. Imagine being able to redirect hurricanes away from populated areas. Stop tornadoes before they form. End droughts with precision rainfall. It sounded reasonable, logical, everything my scientific mind should have embraced. But my heart was screaming warnings, and the bond one shared with Alec was pulsing with desperate urgency. I need time to think, I said. Taylor checked her watch. You have 24 hours, Ms. Chun. After that, we'll assume you've made your choice, and we'll proceed accordingly. She headed for the door, her agents falling into step behind her. But she paused at the threshold and looked back at me. For what it's worth, I hope you make the smart choice. People like us, we don't get happy endings if we fight the system. We get buried by it. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving me alone with the weight of an impossible decision. I sank onto the bed, my head in my hands, feeling the electricity under my skin growing stronger with my distress. 24 hours to choose between the man who'd changed my life forever and the family I'd loved my entire life. But even as I sat there, drowning in the implications of Taylor's ultimatum, one thought kept echoing through my mind. She'd said Alec's bloodline was ancient, that he was sworn to protect the world from catastrophic weather events. But she'd also said the process was killing him. What if there was another way? What if the bond between us wasn't just about shared pain and power, but about finding a solution that could save both Alec and the people he was trying to protect? My phone buzzed with another weather alert, and this time, the spike of precognitive knowledge that came with it nearly knocked me unconscious. Something massive was coming. Something that would make every previous natural disaster look like a gentle spring shower. And somehow, I knew with absolute certainty that both Alec and the government's weather division were going to be powerless to stop it. Unless I found a way to change the rules of the game entirely. The lightning scars on my palms pulsed with sudden heat, and in that moment of connection, I felt Alec's presence more clearly than ever before. He was in trouble. Real, immediate, life-threatening trouble. And I had less than 24 hours to decide whether saving him was worth destroying everything else I'd ever cared about. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. 23 hours and 47 minutes. That's how long I'd been staring at Director Taylor's business card, trying to find a third option that didn't exist. The motel room felt like a prison cell, the walls closing in with each passing minute. My phone had been buzzing nonstop with weather alerts that proved my abilities were getting stronger and more dangerous. In the last day alone, I'd predicted 6 separate natural disasters with pinpoint accuracy, each vision hitting me like a physical blow. But it was the constant ache of Alex's pain that was slowly driving me insane. Through our bond, I could feel him out there, struggling to contain something massive. Every few hours, waves of agony would crash through me as he channeled lightning strike after lightning strike, his body serving as a conduit for forces that were literally burning him alive from the inside out. I pressed my hands against the window, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. Those weren't natural formations. I could feel Alex's influence in their swirling patterns, sense his desperation as he tried to prevent something catastrophic. My phone rang. Taylor's number. "Time's up, Ms. Chen." Her voice was crisp, professional. No trace of the sympathy I thought I detected yesterday. "What's your decision?" I closed my eyes, feeling the lightning scars on my palms pulse with heat. In my mind, I could see my family, my parents making dinner together, my brother cramming for finals, my grandmother watering her roses. Safe, happy, unaware that their lives hung in the balance of my choice. "I'll do it," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I'll help you find Alec." "Smart girl. There's a black SUV waiting outside your motel. Don't keep us waiting." The line went dead, and I sank onto the bed, my hands shaking. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm me, a different plan was taking shape in my mind. Taylor thought she was so clever, manipulating me with threats and promises. She had no idea what she was dealing with. If they wanted to use me as bait to capture Alec, then that's exactly what I'd let them do. Right up until the moment I turned the tables on all of them. The government facility was exactly what I'd expected. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, and the kind of sterile environment that sucked all the warmth out of the world. Taylor led me through a maze of corridors to a room filled with weather monitoring equipment that made my graduate school setup look like toys. "Impressive, isn't it?" she said, watching my reaction. "We've been tracking storm-touched individuals for over a decade. Every weather anomaly, every impossible forecast, every time someone like you reveals themselves, we know about it within hours." I studied the screens showing weather patterns across the globe, noting the subtle markers that indicated supernatural influence. "How many of us are there?" "More than you might think. Fewer than we'd like." Taylor pulled up a digital map dotted with red markers. "Most storm-touched individuals have limited abilities, minor weather sensitivity, small-scale influence. But you and your friend, you're in a completely different category." She gestured to a cluster of alerts centered on the Montana wilderness. "He's been busy, preventing a wildfire that would have consumed 3 towns, redirecting a flash flood, dissipating a tornado formation. All in the last 48 hours. Sounds like he's helping people," I said carefully. Taylor's expression hardened. "He's disrupting natural patterns that have existed for millennia. Every intervention creates ripple effects, Catherine. Stop a tornado in Montana, and you might cause a drought in California 6 months later. The weather is a delicate system, and your friend is throwing it completely out of balance." Part of me wanted to argue, to defend Alec's actions, but I needed Taylor to believe I was cooperating. "So what's the plan?" "Simple. We've identified his location. He's holed up in an abandoned weather station about 50 miles north of here. Our normal tracking methods can't penetrate the electromagnetic interference he generates, but your bond with him should cut right through it." She handed me a small device that looked like a modified GPS unit. "This will amplify your connection to him, allow you to pinpoint his exact location. Once we have him contained, our technicians can begin the process of channeling his abilities into more productive applications." I took the device, noting the weight of it, the way it hummed with subtle energy. "What happens to him after that?" "He'll be given the same choice you were. Work with us, or face the consequences of his actions." Taylor's smile was cold as winter. But unlike you, Catherine, he doesn't have family to protect, which makes him significantly more dangerous. An hour later, I was sitting in the back of an armored vehicle, surrounded by agents in tactical gear. The device in my hands was growing warmer as we approached Alec's location, its display showing a steady pulse that matched the rhythm of my own heartbeat. But there was something else, a growing sense of urgency that had nothing to do with the mission. Through our bond, I could feel Alec's exhaustion, sense that he was pushing himself beyond all reasonable limits. Whatever he was trying to prevent, it was big enough to kill him in the process. Target acquired, the driver announced as we crested a hill and saw the abandoned weather station below. It was surrounded by an impressive light show, continuous lightning strikes that formed a protective barrier around the building. Jesus, one of the agents muttered. How are we supposed to get through that? Taylor turned to me, her eyes bright with anticipation. That's where you come in, Catherine. Your bond with him should allow you to pass through his defenses. Get inside, gain his trust, then activate this. She handed me a second device, smaller than the first. It's an electromagnetic pulse generator, specifically calibrated to disrupt storm touched abilities. One press of that button, and his lightning barrier will collapse. I palmed the device, my stomach churning with guilt and determination in equal measure. And then we bring him in, and both of you start your new lives as assets of the United States government. I climbed out of the vehicle, feeling the electricity in the air raise every hair on my body. The lightning strikes were incredible, pure, raw power that spoke to something deep in my DNA. As I approached the barrier, the bolts began to curve toward me instead of striking randomly. They recognized me, or rather, they recognized the bond one shared with their creator. I stepped through the wall of lightning, feeling the energy wash over me like warm water. For a moment, the constant ache I'd been carrying since our first meeting disappeared, replaced by a sense of completion that nearly brought me to my knees. Then I saw him. Alec was standing in the center of the station, arms raised toward the open roof, his body serving as a conduit for massive bolts of lightning that struck him every few seconds. But he wasn't just being struck, he was actively pulling the energy into himself, channeling it through his body and down into the earth through metal conductors he'd rigged throughout the building. And he was dying. His skin was pale as parchment, dark veins visible beneath the surface like a roadmap of exhaustion. When he turned to look at me, his storm-colored eyes were shot through with silver, beautiful and terrible and completely inhuman. Catherine, he breathed, his voice hoarse from screaming. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. What are you doing? I asked, stepping closer despite the danger. You're killing yourself. There's a massive system building over the Yellowstone caldera, he said, another lightning bolt tearing through him as he spoke. If it reaches full strength, the electromagnetic interference will trigger seismic activity. We're talking about a supervolcanic eruption that could end civilization as we know it. My blood turned to ice. No wonder the government wanted to capture him. They probably had no idea what he was actually preventing. There has to be another way, I said, pulling out Taylor's EMP device. But instead of activating it, I crushed it beneath my boot. You don't have to do this alone. His eyes widened as he realized what I'd just done. Catherine, what have you? I'm not here to betray you, I said quickly. I'm here to help. The government threatened my family, but I have a plan. We're going to expose what they're really doing, show the world that storm-touched individuals aren't the enemy. For a moment, hope flickered in his silver-shot eyes. Then another massive lightning strike hit him, and he screamed, a sound of pure agony that tore through our bond and left me gasping. The system is too strong, he managed. I can't hold it much longer. You need to get out of here before. The building shook as something exploded outside. Taylor's voice echoed through a bullhorn. Catherine, you have 30 seconds to activate the device, or we're coming in. They'll kill us both, Alex said, his body convulsing as another bolt struck him. You should have stayed away. Like hell, I snarled, feeling my own power rising in response to his distress. The lightning scars on my palms were glowing now, bright enough to cast shadows in the stormlit building. You said the bond between us would bring power. Let's find out what that means. I stepped forward and pressed my hands against his chest, feeling the lightning coursing through his body like liquid fire. The moment we made contact, our bond exploded into full connection. His pain became mine, his power flowed through me, and suddenly I understood exactly what he'd been trying to do. I can see it, I whispered, watching the massive weather system through his eyes. The pressure differential, the electromagnetic buildup, the way it's all connecting to the geological instability below. Catherine, no, he said. But I was already reaching out with my newfound abilities, feeling for the storm system's weak points. We do this together, I told him, and began to pull lightning into myself the way I'd seen him do. The pain was indescribable. Every bolt that struck me felt like being turned inside out, like having my nervous system rewritten with molten metal. But with each strike, I could feel the massive system beginning to destabilize, its organized chaos breaking down into manageable components. The problem was, I'd never tried to channel this much power before. My untrained abilities were like a fire hose compared to Alex's laser-precise control. Instead of carefully dismantling the dangerous weather pattern, I was accidentally creating something even worse. Stop! Alex shouted, but it was too late. Lightning began striking the building at random, no longer contained by his protective barrier. The metal conductors he'd set up couldn't handle the chaotic energy I was generating. Sparks flew from every piece of electronic equipment, and I could smell smoke from small fires breaking out throughout the station. Worse, I could feel my uncontrolled power expanding outward, affecting weather patterns across the entire region. What had started as an attempt to prevent one disaster was rapidly becoming the cause of another. I can't control it, I gasped, feeling electricity racing through my body in patterns that hurt more than anything I'd ever experienced. It's too much, I can't. Alec made a decision that probably saved both our lives and definitely broke my heart. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, his body becoming a conduit not just for the lightning striking us, but for all the chaotic energy I was generating. I felt his abilities lock onto mine, his decades of training and control wrestling my raw power into manageable flows. But the cost was devastating. Taking on both his own burden and my uncontrolled abilities was more than even his enhanced physiology could handle. I felt his life force burning away like a candle in a hurricane, sacrificing himself to save me and everyone else from the disaster I'd accidentally created. No, I whispered, watching his skin grow paler, his eyes losing their silver fire. No, you can't do this. There has to be another way. Every bolt of lightning you take into yourself, I told him, pressing closer as his body began to fail, I'll take into mine. We share this burden now. I opened myself up completely, letting our bond flow both ways. If he was going to burn himself out saving everyone, then I was going to burn with him. Maybe together we could survive what neither of us could handle alone. The moment I stopped fighting the connection and started embracing it, everything changed. Instead of chaotic, destructive energy, our combined abilities began to resonate, creating patterns that were stronger and more stable than either of us could achieve individually. The dangerous weather system over Yellowstone dissolved like sugar in rain. Its energy dispersed safely across hundreds of miles. The lightning strikes around us gradually decreased, then stopped altogether. The immediate crisis was over. But Alec was unconscious in my arms, his body limp and cold, his breathing so shallow I had to press my ear to his chest to make sure his heart was still beating. Stay with me, I whispered, channeling what remained of my energy into him, trying to replace some of what he'd sacrificed to save us all. You don't get to die on me now, not after everything we've been through. That's when I felt them, other presences, other minds touched by storm and lightning, approaching fast from multiple directions. The energy we'd released had acted like a beacon, calling to others like us across hundreds of miles. I looked up to see figures moving through the smoke and debris of the weather station, men and women of various ages, all carrying the same electric charge that surrounded Alec and me. Their eyes held the same silver fire. Their movements carried the same fluid grace. More storm touched, and from the determined expressions on their faces, they weren't here to help the government capture us. Who are you? I called out, still cradling Alec's unconscious form. A woman who looked to be in her 30s stepped forward, electricity dancing between her fingers. We're family, she said simply. And we've been waiting a long time for the two of you to stop hiding and start fighting back. Outside, I could hear Taylor's voice shouting orders, the sound of vehicles and tactical equipment being deployed. The government forces were regrouping, preparing for a siege. But as I looked around at the faces of these other storm-touched individuals, I realized the game had just changed completely. We were no longer running from the people who wanted to control us. We were about to make our stand. Chapter 4, The Gathering Storm. The woman with electricity dancing between her fingers wasn't alone. As smoke cleared from the destroyed weather station, I counted at least a dozen figures emerging from the Montana wilderness. Men and women of various ages, all moving with that same fluid grace I'd come to associate with storm-touched abilities. The air around them shimmered with barely contained energy, and I could feel their power like a physical presence pressing against my consciousness. Emily Rodriguez, the woman said, extending a hand crackling with miniature lightning bolts. And before you ask, yes, I'm the one who's been redirecting hurricanes away from populated areas for the past 3 years. I shifted Alec's unconscious weight in my arms, still channeling what little energy I had left into keeping him alive. The government doesn't know you exist. Oh, they know. A man emerged from behind Emily, tall and broad-shouldered, with prematurely white hair and eyes the color of winter storms. Daniel Chun, no relation, I assume. I control blizzards, ice storms, anything involving frozen precipitation. And I've been on their most wanted list since I prevented the northeastern ice storm of 2019 from becoming a Category 5 disaster. More introductions followed as the group spread out around us, forming a protective circle. Sarah, who could manipulate fog and mist. Marcus, whose specialty was dust storms and desert winds. Angela, who commanded monsoons. Each of them had a story similar to mine and Alec's, a painful awakening, abilities that came with a terrible cost, and a choice between hiding or fighting back. How did you find us? I asked, struggling to process the reality that we weren't alone in this nightmare. The energy signature you two created when you bonded your abilities, Emily explained, her eyes never leaving the perimeter where government forces were undoubtedly regrouping. It was like a beacon visible from 3 states away. Every storm-touched individual on the continent felt it. She knelt beside Alec, placing a hand on his forehead. Her expression grew grim. He's burning himself out. How long has he been channeling energy at this level? Days, I whispered. Maybe weeks. He's been trying to prevent some kind of supervolcanic event at Yellowstone, but the strain is killing him. Daniel's face went pale. Yellowstone? Jesus, Catherine, do you have any idea what would happen if that caldera erupted? Civilization would end, said a new voice, and I looked up to see a teenage girl with silver streaked hair approaching us. She couldn't have been more than 17, but her eyes held the same ancient weariness I'd seen in Alec's gaze. I'm Luna. I predict seismic weather interactions, and what your friend has been preventing isn't just an eruption, it's the trigger for a new ice age. The weight of that revelation hit me like a physical blow. Alec hadn't just been saving lives, he'd been saving the entire planet, one lightning strike at a time. But that's not the worst part, Emily continued, her voice grim. Show her, Marcus. The man who controlled dust storms pulled out a tablet, its screen showing satellite imagery of weather stations around the globe. But these weren't natural formations, they were geometric patterns, perfectly symmetrical arrays that looked more like technological installations than meteorological phenomena. Project Tempest, Marcus said. The government's been building weather control arrays at key points around the planet. They think they can replace natural weather patterns with artificial ones, eliminate the chaos and unpredictability that makes storms dangerous. That's actually not a terrible idea, I said slowly. If they could control weather patterns, prevent natural disasters, they'd destroy the planet's entire atmospheric system, Luna interrupted. Weather isn't just about rain and wind, Catherine. It's about energy transfer, pressure equalization, the delicate balance between heat and cold that makes life on Earth possible. Daniel pulled up another screen showing computer models that made my blood run cold. Their projections show a 60% reduction in chaotic weather events. What they're not accounting for is that those chaotic events are what keep the atmosphere stable. Remove the chaos and you get stagnation. Stagnation leads to temperature inversions. And temperature inversions on a global scale. Create an ice age, I finished, understanding dawning like a horrifying sunrise. They're going to freeze the planet trying to control it. And that's why we're here, Emily said, standing and scanning the perimeter again. We've been tracking Project Tempest for months, trying to figure out how to stop it. But their installations are too well defended. Too widespread for any individual storm touch to handle alone. She looked directly at me, her eyes intense. But your bond with Alec created something we've never seen before. A resonance cascade that amplified both your abilities exponentially. If we could replicate that effect with all of us, we could generate enough power to overload their entire network, Daniel finished. Shut down Project Tempest permanently. And probably kill ourselves in the process, Marcus added grimly. That kind of power linking has never been attempted. The energy feedback alone could fry our nervous systems. I looked down at Alec's pale, unconscious face, feeling his life force flickering like a candle in a hurricane. What if we don't? What if we let them activate their weather control system? Then everyone dies anyway, Luna said simply. Slowly as the planet freezes, but they die just the same. The sound of helicopters approaching cut through our conversation, and Emily cursed under her breath. They're moving in. We need to make a decision now, fight or flight. There's a third option, I said, an insane plan forming in my mind. What if we don't run and we don't fight? What if we give them exactly what they want? Daniel stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You want to surrender? I want to get close enough to Director Taylor to find out what she's really planning, I said, thinking of the woman who'd threatened my family. There's something she's not telling us about Project Tempest. Something personal. Emily's eyes narrowed. What makes you think that? She smelled like ozone, I said. And when I accused her of being storm-touched, she didn't deny it. She said she'd been suppressed. What if she's not just hunting us because we're dangerous? What if she's hunting us because she wants what we have? The helicopter sounds were getting closer, and I could hear vehicles moving through the forest around us. We were surrounded, and Alec was in no condition to be moved. Catherine, Emily said urgently, whatever you're thinking, we need to decide now. I looked around at these people who'd risked everything to find us, who'd revealed themselves to save two strangers from a government they'd been hiding from for years. They deserve the truth. I think Director Taylor is planning to use Project Tempest to steal our abilities, I said. She's not trying to control the weather. She's trying to control us. And once she has our power channeled through her machines, she won't need us alive anymore. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a gathering storm. If I was right, then surrender meant death, not just for us, but potentially for every storm-touched individual on the planet. So, what do you want to do? Daniel asked. I felt Alec's pulse flutter weakly against my palm, felt the fading warmth of his life force. In the distance, I could hear Director Taylor's voice calling through a bullhorn, demanding our surrender. I want to call her bluff, I said. Force her to reveal what she's really after. And then, I looked up at the storm clouds gathering overhead. Not natural formations, but the residual energy from our earlier power display, still swirling with uncontrolled electricity. Then I want to embrace the lightning. Emily followed my gaze and smiled grimly. That's either the bravest thing I've ever heard, or the stupidest. Probably both, I admitted. But I'm done being afraid of what I might become. Alec nearly died trying to protect everyone by himself. If we're going to stop Project Tempest, we need to work together. And if the power linking kills us all? I looked down at Alec's unconscious form, feeling the bond between us pulse with weak but steady energy. Then at least we die fighting for something that matters. The helicopter sounds were directly overhead now, and spotlights began cutting through the smoke and debris. Director Taylor's voice echoed across the clearing. Catherine Chun. You have 60 seconds to come out with your hands visible, or we start using lethal force. She's bluffing, Marcus said. They need us alive. Do they? Emily asked. If they can steal our abilities through their machines, what use are we? I made my decision. Standing carefully, I cradled Alec against my chest and stepped into the open, the other storm touched forming a protective circle around me. The spotlight found us immediately, and I squinted against the glare as Taylor's voice crackled through the bullhorn again. That's far enough. Release the hostage and surrender immediately. Hostage? As if Alec were some innocent bystander instead of the man who'd been sacrificing himself to save the world. Director Taylor. I called out. I want to make a deal. A pause. Then her voice came back, closer now. She left the helicopter and was approaching on foot, probably with a full tactical team. You're in no position to negotiate, Ms. Chun. Actually, I think I am. I gestured to the storm clouds still swirling overhead, to the electricity that was beginning to arc between the gathered storm-touched individuals. You want our abilities? Come and take them. Taylor emerged from the tree line, flanked by agents in full combat gear. But it was her expression that caught my attention, not anger or professional determination, but something that looked almost like hunger. You have no idea what you're playing with, she said, stopping just outside the circle of storm-touched individuals. These abilities you think make you special? They're just evolutionary dead ends. Genetic mistakes that nature would have eliminated if left alone. Is that what you told yourself when you suppressed your own abilities? I asked, and had the satisfaction of watching her facade crack, just slightly. I made a choice, she said coldly. I chose to be human instead of a monster. And look how that worked out for you, Emily said, electricity crackling around her fingers. Hunting your own kind, threatening innocent families. Very human of you, Director. Taylor's composure slipped another notch, and I caught a whiff of that ozone scent again, stronger now, as if her suppressed abilities were fighting against whatever was keeping them contained. You want to see what your precious abilities really lead to? She snarled and pulled out a device I'd never seen before. Something that looked like a cross between a tablet and a weapon. Director, one of her agents said nervously. Our orders were to capture them alive. Orders change, Taylor said, and activated the device. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every storm-touched individual in the circle cried out in agony as something that felt like liquid fire poured through our nervous systems. But it wasn't just pain, it was extraction. I could feel my abilities being pulled out of me, drawn into the device like water into a drain. Project Tempest was never about controlling the weather, Taylor said, her voice thick with satisfaction as the device continued to drain our power. It was about harvesting storm-touched abilities and concentrating them in a single, controllable source. She held up the device, which was now glowing with captured energy. Decades of research, hundreds of test subjects, all leading to this moment. And the best part? Once I absorb all of your abilities, I'll finally be what I was always meant to be. The hunger in her eyes was unmistakable now. She wasn't just stealing our powers, she was planning to use them herself. But she'd made one crucial mistake. In her obsession with gaining storm-touched abilities, she'd forgotten that some bonds couldn't be broken by technology. I felt Alex stirring in my arms, his consciousness returning as the device pulled at our shared connection. Our eyes met, and in that moment, we both understood what we had to do. Emily, I shouted over the sound of the extraction device. Link with us. All of you now. Instead of fighting the pull of Taylor's machine, we embraced it. Let it draw our abilities into itself while simultaneously linking those abilities together in ways it was never designed to handle. The device in Taylor's hands began to smoke, its circuits overloading as it tried to process not individual storm-touched powers, but a resonance cascade involving more than a dozen linked abilities. What are you doing? Taylor screamed, but it was too late. The feedback explosion was visible from space, a pillar of lightning that connected earth to sky, carrying with it the combined power of every storm-touched individual in the circle. When the light faded, Taylor's device was a melted ruin in her hands. But the real change was in her eyes. The hunger was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. My abilities, she whispered, staring at her hands. I can feel them again. The suppression technology she'd used on herself had been linked to the same system as the extraction device. When we overloaded it, we'd accidentally freed her from whatever had been restraining her storm-touched nature for years. Sarah, I said, watching as she raised her hands and small whirlwinds began to form around her fingers. Your name is Sarah Taylor, and you control tornadoes. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I'd forgotten what it felt like. The connection, the power, the way the storm calls to you. It doesn't have to be a curse, Alex said, his voice weak, but steady as he struggled to sit up in my arms. The abilities, the bond, the responsibility, it's all about choice. Taylor, Sarah, looked around at her tactical team, who were staring at her in shock and confusion. Then she looked at us, at the other storm-touched individuals who'd risked everything to save two strangers. Project Tempest, she said finally. The weather control arrays. They're set to activate in 72 hours. Can you stop them? Emily asked. Sarah's smile was sad but determined. Not alone, but together. She gestured to all of us, including Alec and me. Together, we might just have enough power to shut down the entire network. And if we can't? Daniel asked. Sarah looked up at the storm clouds that were already beginning to dissipate, the crisis temporarily averted but far from over. Then we'd better hope humanity is ready for an ice age. Chapter 5, When Thunder Answers. 72 hours. That's all the time we had to save the world from freezing to death. I stood on the observation deck of the abandoned NOAA facility in Colorado, watching satellite feeds that showed Project Tempest's weather control arrays coming online across 6 continents. Each activation sent ripples through the global atmospheric system, creating artificial pressure zones that were already disrupting natural weather patterns. Temperature readings from the Arctic are dropping faster than our models predicted, Luna announced from her position at the main computer bank. At 17, she'd become our unofficial coordinator, her ability to predict seismic weather interactions making her invaluable for tracking the cascade effects. If they activate the final array in Antarctica, we'll hit the tipping point. How long do we have? Alec asked, his voice still hoarse from our battle 3 days ago. He was standing now, though I could feel through our bond that he was running on willpower and coffee. The sacrifice he'd made to save everyone was still taking its toll. 6 hours, Daniel said grimly, frost forming around his fingers as his stress activated his abilities. Maybe less if this natural superstorm brewing over the Pacific interacts with their artificial systems. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see that storm on the horizon, a massive spiral of clouds that stretched from California to Alaska. It was the kind of weather event that happened maybe once in a century, the atmosphere's way of releasing built-up pressure and energy. But Project Tempest was going to turn it into a weapon. Their plan is diabolical in its simplicity, Sarah said, studying the tactical displays with the expertise of someone who'd helped design the system she was now trying to destroy. They're going to use the superstorm's energy to power a massive artificial high-pressure system centered over the polar ice caps. The temperature differential will create permanent Arctic conditions across most of the northern hemisphere. Emily looked up from where she'd been coordinating with storm-touched individuals around the globe. Our people in position report the same thing everywhere. The arrays are drawing power from natural weather systems and redirecting it toward the poles. It's like they're trying to recreate the last ice age. Because they are, Marcus said, dust swirling around him in agitated patterns. Think about it. If most of the planet becomes uninhabitable, the surviving population will be completely dependent on whoever controls the technology that created the new climate. The weight of that realization settled over all of us like a shroud. This wasn't just about stopping a rogue government project. It was about preventing the enslavement of humanity itself. So what's our play? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. Alec moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine with the automatic ease that had developed over the past few days. We link our abilities and overload their entire network simultaneously. Hit every array at once before they can adapt or shut down individual nodes. And probably die in the process, Angela added quietly. She controlled monsoons, and I could see her wrestling with the same fears we all shared. The kind of power linking required to reach 6 continents at once, nobody's ever attempted anything like this before. Because nobody's ever had to, Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the true scope of what we were facing. Project Tempest represents 30 years of research and development, billions of dollars in infrastructure, and enough political backing to override every environmental protection treaty on the planet. She gestured to the satellite feeds. They're not just stealing our abilities anymore, they're using them. Every storm-touched individual they've captured over the years, every power they've extracted and stored, it's all being channeled through those arrays. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They're using our people as batteries. Living ones, Sarah confirmed. The extraction process doesn't kill storm-touched individuals. It just puts them in a catatonic state while their abilities are harvested continuously. I felt Alec's rage spike through our bond, saw lightning beginning to arc between his fingers. Around the room, the other storm-touched individuals were having similar reactions. Emily's hair was whipping around her face from miniature hurricane winds. Daniel's breath was forming ice crystals in the air, and Marcus had unconsciously created a small sandstorm in the corner. How many? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Based on our intelligence, at least 50 individuals scattered across the different facilities. Sarah's expression was haunted. Some of them have been unconscious for years, their abilities slowly burning out as they're used to power the weather control experiments. Then this isn't just about stopping an ice age, Emily said, her hurricane winds growing stronger. It's about rescue. We save the planet and we save our people. Or we die trying, Luna added with the matter-of-fact pragmatism that only teenagers seem to possess. Through the windows, I could see the superstorm getting closer, its outer bands already bringing fierce winds and driving rain to the Colorado Rockies. But there was something else, artificial lightning patterns within the natural formation, geometric shapes that spoke of human interference. They're already tapping into it, I breathed, watching as the storm's energy was slowly being siphoned away by invisible collectors. The superstorm, they're using it to power the final phase. Alarms started blaring throughout the facility as Luna's monitoring equipment detected massive energy buildups at weather stations around the globe. Antarctic Array is coming online, she shouted over the noise. They're starting the final sequence. This was it. Do or die time. I looked around at the faces of the people who'd become my family over the past few days. Emily with her fierce determination, Daniel with his quiet strength, Sarah with her desperate need for redemption, and all the others who'd risked everything to stand with us. And Alec, whose bond with me had started this entire journey, whose love had given me the courage to embrace powers I'd never wanted. Everyone ready? I asked, though ready was probably the wrong word. None of us were ready for what we were about to attempt. Links established, Emily reported as the storm touched individuals around the room joined hands, forming a circle with Alec and me at the center. I can feel everyone, our people here, and the contacts we have positioned near the other arrays. The moment our hands connected, the world exploded into shared sensation. I could feel Emily's hurricane spinning in my chest, Daniel's blizzards freezing my breath, Marcus's sandstorm scraping against my skin. Every ability, every power, every individual consciousness flowing together into something greater than the sum of its parts. But it was more than that. Through the network of linked storm-touched individuals, I could sense the others, the ones being held captive, their abilities being harvested to power the weather control arrays. They were weak, barely conscious, but they were alive, and they were waiting for us to save them. I can see the entire network, I gasped, my consciousness expanding to encompass weather patterns across 6 continents. Every array, every power source, every connection point. The Antarctic station is the keystone, Alex said, his voice strained as he processed information flowing through our bond. If we can overload it, the feedback will cascade through the entire system. But the distance, Sarah protested. Even with all of us linked, projecting that much power halfway around the world. We use the superstorm, I realized suddenly. It's already connected to their network, already channeling energy to the arrays. We reverse the flow, turn their own system against them. The plan was insane, dangerous, and probably impossible. We'd have to insert ourselves into the middle of one of the most powerful natural disasters in recorded history, hijack a global weather control network, and redirect enough energy to power a small country, all while maintaining a psychic link between more than a dozen storm-touched individuals scattered across the planet. Any objections? Emily asked, though she was already beginning to channel her hurricane abilities into the growing power matrix. Just one, Alex said, his grip on my hand tightening. If this goes wrong, if the power feedback kills us all, I want you to know that meeting you, bonding with you, it was worth everything. I felt tears streaming down my face as I squeezed his hand back. Same here. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Touching, Daniel said dryly, though I could feel his emotional support through the link. Now can we please save the world before I freeze to death from my own abilities? I laughed despite everything, feeling the warmth of connection with these incredible people who'd become my chosen family. Whatever happened next, we wouldn't face it alone. Initiating power transfer, Emily announced. The sensation was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Our linked abilities flowed out of us like a river of liquid lightning, racing across continents at the speed of thought. Through the global network of storm-touched individuals, we reached out to every weather control array simultaneously. But instead of trying to destroy them directly, we did something they'd never anticipated. We became them. The storm isn't our enemy, I realized as lightning coursed through all of us, as our consciousness expanded to encompass weather patterns across the entire planet. We are the storm. Instead of fighting Project Tempest's artificial weather systems, we absorbed them, took control of every array, every collector, every piece of technology they'd built to steal and redirect natural weather patterns. For a moment, we were gods of sky and storm, commanding forces that could reshape continents and alter the course of rivers. The power was intoxicating, overwhelming, and I finally understood the true temptation that had driven the people behind Project Tempest. But I also understood something else, something that Alec had been trying to tell me from the very beginning. True power wasn't about controlling the storm. It was about accepting that you were part of something much larger than yourself. So instead of hoarding the energy we'd captured, we gave it back. Every jewel of power that had been stolen from natural weather patterns, we returned to where it belonged. Every storm-touched individual held captive, we freed. Every artificial pressure system and temperature differential, we allowed to normalize. The feedback was catastrophic for Project Tempest. Across 6 continents, weather control arrays overloaded and exploded as their stolen energy was returned to the natural systems they've been disrupting. The artificial ice age they've been trying to create collapsed as normal weather patterns reasserted themselves. And in facilities around the globe, 50 storm-touched individuals opened their eyes for the first time in years, their abilities returned, their lives restored. But the cost to us was enormous. I felt Alec collapse beside me as the power drain hit him, felt Emily and Daniel and Sarah and all the others pushed beyond their limits by the sheer scope of what we just accomplished. The psychic link that had connected us was fragmenting, each mind struggling to return to its individual boundaries. Except it couldn't. Not completely. The experience had changed us, bonded us in ways that went deeper than conscious thought. Even as our individual consciousnesses separated, I could still feel them. Emily's fierce protectiveness, Daniel's quiet strength, Sarah's determined redemption, and all the others who'd risked everything to stand with us. And Alec, whose bond with me had started this journey and now felt like a permanent part of my soul. Is it over? Luna asked weakly, blood trickling from her nose, but her eyes bright with exhaustion and triumph. Through the windows, I could see the superstorm beginning to dissipate, its energy no longer being artificially harvested. Around the globe, weather patterns were returning to normal as the artificial systems shut down permanently. It's over, I confirmed, helping Alex sit up as he struggled to regain consciousness. Project Tempest is finished. 6 months later. Good morning, and welcome to Stormwatch Weather Services. This is Catherine Chun with your extended forecast. I smiled at the camera, knowing that millions of people across the country trusted our predictions to keep their families safe. What they didn't know was that our 99% accuracy rate came from abilities that went far beyond traditional meteorology. We're tracking a developing low-pressure system in the Gulf of Mexico that has the potential to become a major hurricane by Thursday. However, current atmospheric conditions suggest it will weaken significantly before making landfall, bringing beneficial rainfall to drought-stricken areas of Louisiana and Mississippi instead. What I didn't mention was that Emily had spent the morning carefully adjusting pressure differentials to ensure exactly that outcome. After the cameras stopped rolling, I made my way back to the office I shared with Alec, where he was studying weather satellite data with the intense focus that had first attracted me to him. How's the Pacific looking? I asked, settling into the chair beside his desk. Stable, he said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. A casual gesture that still sent electricity racing through our bond. Though Daniel's been working overtime to prevent some unusual ice storm formations in the Arctic. Apparently, the natural weather patterns are still settling back to normal after Project Tempest. Our love had evolved from the desperate attraction and shared trauma of those first few days into something deeper and more stable. We were partners now in every sense of the word, running a business together, using our abilities to help instead of hide, building a life that honored both our human needs and our storm-touched nature. A soft knock on the office door interrupted my thoughts, and Sarah poked her head in. She'd officially resigned from her government position and was now our head of security, using her inside knowledge to help newly manifested storm-touched individuals avoid the fate she'd once tried to impose on us. Catherine, there's a situation. I looked up to see a teenage boy standing nervously behind her, maybe 16, with the kind of haunted eyes that spoke of abilities he didn't understand and couldn't control. This is Jake, Sarah continued. He showed up at the front desk about an hour ago. Says he can make tornadoes appear whenever he gets emotional. I felt my heart go out to him immediately. I remembered that fear, that sense of being a danger to everyone around you. Standing up, I moved toward Jake with the calm, non-threatening approach I'd learned to use with frightened storm-touched individuals. Don't worry, I said, smiling as I gestured for him to sit down. We know exactly what you're going through and we're here to help. His relief was palpable, and I felt Alex's warm approval through our bond as he joined me in making Jake feel welcome. Outside our office windows, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Not threatening weather, just the natural ebb and flow of atmospheric pressure that kept our planet alive and healthy. I could feel them calling to me, the way they'd been calling since that first day in the Montana wilderness. The electricity in the air, the promise of lightning, the wild power of wind and rain. But now, when the thunder called my name, I had an answer. The thunder still calls, but now Catherine calls back, and the storm listens. If you enjoyed this werewolf romance audiobook, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. See you in the next one.